Now, this is a message of encouragement to those who are here this morning having come discouraged. I want to just tell you about Elijah, for example, this great prophet of God. Do you remember that moment of failure that came to him when he says, Father, why don't you just kill me? Because I am no better than my fathers. In other words, he said, my fathers failed and I'm a failure like my fathers. He said, just take my life. David Livingstone was one of the greatest missionaries of all times. He opened Africa to the gospel. A man who had given body, soul, ministry, life, everything to the Lord, and the sacrifice of his life to Christ. And this is what he said, I've only opened up the slave trade, and all the mission societies that he had raised up are bearing no fruit. And after 23 years of labor, my work seems in me to be in vain. I have labored in vain. David Bowen. He gave up riches and wealth and fame. And he went as a single man to Bombay, India. He decided to give up his mission support. And he began to dress like the natives. And he lived in a little insignificant, poor neighborhood in a hut. He died as the most respected missionary in India. Even idolaters, even Hindus, all of those false religions said, if I want to know what a Christian is and who he is and what he's like, it's David Bowen. And last night I was reading in his biography these words, I'm the most useless being in the church. God bruises and crushes me with disappointments. He builds me up, then he permits me to fall back to nothingness. I would like to sit with Job, and I sympathize with Elijah. My labor has all been in vain. You say, well, preachers shouldn't talk like that. Missionaries shouldn't talk like that. Christians shouldn't talk like that. That sounds like the language of unbelief and fear and doubt. This is the language of all the great preachers of all time and all the Christians of great time, both in the pulpit and out of the pulpit. They have experienced this sense that comes, this lie from the pit of hell. I have not achieved what I thought God called me to. I have not achieved. I have been a failure. Listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far. The Lord that called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother, he hath made mention of my name. He hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand he has hid me. He's made me a polished shaft. In his quiver he has hidden me. Thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. I have labored in vain. I've spent my strength for nothing and in vain. He was called to redeem Israel. He was called to bring. The high priests were to humble. Prisoners were to be set free. The nation was to be delivered from the power of sin. That was his ministry. That was his mission. He has made me a polished arrow, in other words, and he's put me in his quiver. He has made my mouth as a sword. He came into the world to do a work. And what happens? They rejected him as a person. Those sharp, piercing words, they ignored and hardened their hearts so they could not be pierced. He came to a whole generation that saw his miracles. They had blinded eyes open, the deaf were able to hear, and the blind could see, and the dead were raised. And then they ignored his miracles, or they belittled his miracles, or thought nothing of it. Israel crying out, crucify him. And here's Jesus standing before Jerusalem, and he said, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have gathered you as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you would not. So your house is left to you desolate. Can you imagine the pain with which Jesus had to say those words? He knew he was going to be crucified for the people who he came to give his life. He did everything according to the mind of God. I have labored in vain. Why have all the spiritual giants and warriors of all time uttered these words at time? Because it is the measuring of little results in comparison to the great and high expectations. The truth is, we're all called to one grand purpose. Every one of us are called to be like Christ. That is our calling. You have to have this cry in you, I want to be like Jesus. I don't want to live in the flesh. Just stay in the prayer closet. Stay with Jesus in that beautiful communion. He said, I've got better things in store. I've got things beyond anything you could think or expect or believe. I have things in store for you that if you knew, you would leap with joy. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. For as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. get back to work. Get back to doing what I told you to do. And just trust the Lord. Stay in prayer. Believe God.